We'll take a break from the Eagles updates and news. Get to all your messages a little bit later in the show. Keep them coming. 609-403-0973 is the text board. Direct message the show through the 973 ESPN mobile app. Thanks to First Bank of Seattle City. And, of course, we are live, as always, at 973 ESPN on YouTube and Twitter. We're joining us right now, Frank Klose, Phillies mailbag, live at 973ESPN.com. Frank, how you doing today?
I'm great. How are you, Josh?
I'm doing well, but I'm kind of in a little bit of shock because the Phillies have scored 7 runs in 4 straight games. I think we have to go back to what, maybe like leaving last year for this kind of offensive output. I never thought no Rhys Hoskins would mean 7 runs, but it seems like all of us who were screaming to the team to wake up, they finally did wake up a little bit.
Well, I'll say this. The Arizona Diamondbacks helped the Phillies wake up a lot. A lot of those runs in the Diamondback series. So you mentioned the 4 straight wins scoring 7, but they also scored 7 the game they lost before they won 4 in a row. So 7 seems to be the lucky number for the Phillies. But the Arizona defense definitely helped them get there the first couple games. But maybe they're building some momentum. Maybe they're feeling a little bit more confident, and we'll see what they can keep doing, especially against teams like the Nationals.
Now, the Nationals, you could argue through, at this point, their best pitcher last night. You know, Gray at this point is arguably their best pitcher. So do they have a chance to maybe get 2 out of 3 against the Nats here, you think, Frank?
They have a chance of sweeping the Nats, I think. You know, the Nationals are essentially laying down and dying in the National League East. They traded away so much talent. What's left, you have Juan Soto, so you can never totally count them out because he could have a big game and be the entire difference maker. But Patrick Corbin has not been good this year, and the Phillies should be able to get to him. And you know, even though the Phillies are a little bit depleted, the Nationals don't present themselves as a team that's trying to win right now. So Phillies hopefully will take advantage and sweep this series. Of course, tomorrow the weather is looking a little bit dicey down in D.C. as well as the rest of the region. But here's the chance for the Phillies to try to catch up because they got to get a little closer to the Braves. They just absolutely have to when they're playing the Nationals because the Braves swept the Nationals. So if the Phillies aren't sweeping the Nationals while the Braves are playing the Dodgers and hopefully losing a couple games, Phillies aren't going to catch up. So I think they need to think better than 2 or 3. They got to sweep this series.
Now, I mentioned yesterday that they got Wheeler 2 times in a 6-game stretch. And in the Marlins series, they have Gibson and Suarez, 2 of their better pitchers since the second half of the season, and especially in August. If they can get through the Nationals and the Marlins series, Frank, then the Brewers, right now in the scheduled starters, no Burns, no Woodruff, no Peralta. So the Phillies actually have an entire road trip without having to face anybody of serious consequence pitching-wise.
Yeah, that is really helpful. I mean, the Brewers are still a very good team, still have a lot of weapons. That's the one series that if you look at the rest of the season and the schedule, that really kind of stands out as the one that will be the big challenge. The Braves, they swept the Marlins when they faced the Marlins recently. The Phillies will eventually get their Orioles series. The Phillies need to take care of business there. So, you got to think of this in the perspective of where they're at in relation to the Braves. And, the Braves are going to start playing the Rockies a lot. They're going to start playing some of the other lesser teams. They're going to play the Nationals again. So Phillies need to take care of business when they are facing these lesser teams. Otherwise, they're just never going to catch the Braves. They got to get the Braves right where they need them before they face the Braves, and then they need to take care of business against the Braves. So still kind of a rough road ahead in a lot of respects. But if they're not winning games like these or not winning games like the Marlins, and they don't take advantage of the Brewers like you're saying, then they're not going to make it. So really, really important. I think every game is an important game at this point for the Phillies.
Frank Klose joins us for his Phillies mailbag every Tuesday here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. Frank, I'm going to modify Jason's question because Jason's question was surprise September call-ups, but I want to modify it. Explain to the listeners why September call-ups are so different now and how that's significant in what the Phillies do in September.
Well, the big change was supposed to go into effect last season. Of course, they did not have the regular season. They had a 60-game season with all kinds of rules that had to be adjusted on the fly. But after 2019, they decided that they would no longer have the entire 40-man roster as potential active roster players in Major League Baseball. So now the rosters are set at 26, which is one more than it was in 2019. and they can add 2 additional players beyond that come September 1st. So tomorrow they can add a couple players, but really there's really not this bonanza where all of a sudden you can bring in a lot of extra players. I mean, you're essentially looking at now most teams are going to carry their third catcher, because that's kind of a common thing people did, especially as we see JT Realmuto's banged up a little bit. So you want the third catcher around, and of course the Phillies are without Knapp until he gets off the COVID list. So that's probably one of those spots long term. And the other, who doesn't need another pitcher? So I think that the Phillies are going to do what a lot of teams do, is just take advantage of the spot for an extra pitcher, try to get through the stretch. Hopefully there's no rainouts and doubleheaders. So be really interesting to see how they make up a game tomorrow if the rain is as intense as it is in D.C. But you really need that pitching down the stretch. Every team does. I expect the Phillies to use the spot for a pitcher.
Frank, when you think about the pitching staff, as you mentioned, the pitching staff has overall been very well. They showed the stat on MLB Network that Suarez, they're 4-2 when he started so far. What does it say to you that the Phillies have had much better pitchers since the deadline? How much of that is Dombrowski's moves, and how much of that is just guys getting healthy?
Well, of course, Zach Eflin never did get healthy. Ranger Suarez, I think he's an example of somebody getting healthy. He was someone who was supposed to be the 5th starter last year. Well, I'll say supposed to. I thought he had a pretty well build-up lead over Vince Velasquez and Nick Pivetta last spring when spring training shut down. But he got COVID. He was stuck in a hotel room. He had to really build up his strength again, got a little injured, and that's what delayed him this year. So he's finally getting his chance. I think that's a big deal for this Phillies team. He's showing that even in longer stretches now, he can kind of hang with the big boys and can give the Phillies some quality innings and even go a little deeper into games. And let's face it, before you had Suarez, the Chase Anderson, Matt Moore, Spencer Howard, Vince Velasquez turnstile was doing absolutely nothing for them. So you got to feel a lot better about the Phillies with Ranger Suarez in place, and then adding Kyle Gibson. That's another guy that is going to give you 6 innings almost every single time. That's something they could not count on. And Spencer Howard, even since he's been in Texas, doing the same exact thing. 3 inning outings, didn't cut it. So that has enabled the Phillies to be relevant here, even as they've lost some of their offensive pieces and the offense not as potent as it is when everybody is healthy.
Frank Klose joining us, Phillies mailbag up at 973ESPN.com, at Frank Klose on Twitter for all your Phillies coverage, as the Phillies are currently in a series with the Nationals, a road trip that takes them to Washington, then Miami, then Milwaukee, then back to Philadelphia for a homestand. Frank, you mentioned Eflin, and I asked this question to Bob Wankel yesterday. I know it's a little bit incendiary, but how much of the Eflin going to the COVID list was actually the knee flaring up, and how much of it was the COVID list being a convenient way to maybe kind of bypass him for a start or two?
Well, I want to know the real story, because if you look on the Phillies transaction page, it does not say that Zach Eflin was on the COVID list. In fact, it tells you a very, very different story. In fact, I'm pulling it up right now as I speak, but here's what the roster move says on the Phillies transaction page. Phillies placed Zach Eflin on the 10-day injured list, right patella tendinopathy. So if he happens to test positive for COVID, maybe they're using that as a loophole to free up a 40-man spot. I think that would be the one advantage of him being on a COVID list. But they brought him up expecting him to pitch. And so the way that they were speaking, it sounds like he's not going to be ready to pitch anytime soon. I mean, especially with the COVID diagnosis, he's probably going to have to take some time to come back. Having him on the COVID list takes him off the 40-man roster. That means the Phillies can add somebody to the 40-man roster. That's the one advantage they have for that. And, of course, you can have a month's worth of rehab assignments even when you're off. So the Phillies might use that COVID case as a way of adding another player. I mean, they could always put him on the 60-day IL if they're sure he's done for the year. But basically what I'm seeing, it doesn't really sound that good for Zach Eflin coming back in 2021 anyway.
Frank, one more before I let you go. One of the questions also in the Phillies mailbag was about Joe Girardi's future. And you and I have had that conversation before about the fact that, what does the future hold for Girardi? Because if they don't make the playoffs, Dombrowski didn't hire him. I know sometimes these GMs like to hire their guys, right? So What do you think the future holds for Girardi after this season?
Well, I think we've seen from Dave Dombrowski really gutting the front office. I mean, that was a really strong, harsh move that he made the other day, releasing a lot of people from those high-level positions in the organization in the front office, basically saying all the player development leadership needed to be replaced. So if he's doing that, then he's clearly not placing blame on Joe Girardi for this Phillies team performance. He's placing a lot of blame on the inability of the organization to properly develop players. So that seems to be an indication that he doesn't have the tools to manage the team to the playoffs the way that perhaps should have been the case with the talent they had. So besides that, there have been a few reports out there. I believe it was Matt Gelb of The Athletic referring to, and I've heard things myself, that Joe Girardi is helping reshape this Phillies organization. So a lot of these moves are not being done without Girardi's input. And it seems to me that Dombrowski, if he's getting the input from Girardi, he has a lot of confidence in Girardi. He has a lot of confidence in his ability to evaluate talent. And makes me think that he's going to be around for after this offseason, where I expect even more changes, especially when it comes to the players on the field and the makeup of this major league roster. I think we're going to see a lot of changes, but I think Joe Girardi is going to stick around through those changes.
For more information, go to the Phillies mailbag over at 973ESPN.com and the 973 ESPN mobile app. Frank Klose joins us to talk today more about the Phillies. Frank, I'm sure you and I will talk again a little bit later in the week as the Phillies continue this road trip, 9 games in total before they return back to Philadelphia. Great stuff today, Frank.
Always good to talk to you, Josh.